In this part we will look at what entrepreneurial methods is as a phenomenon. There is not one single entrepreneurial method that is best. I prefer to see it as a toolbox of many different methods to choose from. Just like a carpenter doesn't use only a hammer, an entrepreneurial person must use a variety of different entrepreneurial methods. On Monday morning, she might use design thinking to better empathize with her potential users. Later the same day, she might draw on effectuation to try to find new people who want to join her risky but exciting journey. Then on Tuesday, she might take inspiration from appreciative inquiry when trying to dream up a compelling vision for her project together with her colleagues. This could then feed into a workshop on Thursday, where the core team tries to come up with hypotheses that they need to test with potential customers in order to see if their dream vision is viable, drawing on lean startup methodology. Later the same day, the team leader might prepare for Friday's board or committee meeting by drawing on discovery-driven planning to do a reverse income statement, a calculation around what income is needed to sustain the current activities. Finally, when Friday comes, the board or committee might ask for a proper business plan before they go on with a crucial investment decision proposed by the team leader or CEO. So, in one single week, the entire toolbox might be needed, no different than a carpenter at work in a regular week. But what characterizes an entrepreneurial method? Together with my Chalmers colleague Yashar Mansouri, I spent a couple of years trying to compare 6 different entrepreneurial methods. This is what we found. There were a number of common features across many or most entrepreneurial methods. All of them had a certain focus on expanding knowledge one way or another, and to try to identify or describe how value is created for customers or users. Most of them had a focus on working iteratively, in a trial and error manner, changing direction when needed, learning continuously, and managing resources in various ways. Only some of the methods also had a focus on stakeholder interactions, on trying to manage uncertainty, and on collaborating as a team. One thing that was relatively clear in our comparison was that certain methods are better than others depending at what development stage your project is in. Time does matter when considering which entrepreneurial method to pick up. When you're in a very early stage, here illustrated by a rowboat, effectuation might be the most suitable method. When you've grown into a sailboat, lean startup could be a better choice, since by then stakes are higher and more carefully planned maneuvers are needed. And finally, when you're in charge of a large ferry, it's a good idea to have a proper business plan. Few investors will want to fund your grand plans unless you provide them with a well-crafted plan of some kind. They will want to see and read for themselves, not just trust your fancy pitch presentation. Now we will look into some of the more practical implications of entrepreneurial methods. What do these methods recommend people to do more practically? Here's a spider diagram that builds on the 9 dimensions in our comparison earlier. Any entrepreneurial person can use this framework to map out to what extent he or she is following different pieces of advice from the methods. Am I embracing failure and uncertainty? Are we interacting with people outside our team and building? Are we trying to take control over the process and over the resources needed, etc., etc.? Now I will try to map out some of the most important pieces of advice from some of the most commonly used entrepreneurial methods. Going through each and every piece of advice isn't really practical in this video. Instead, I propose that you pause the video or return to it later to contemplate all the different pieces of advice given by various entrepreneurial methods. There are a lot of recommendations here. No one can follow everything, but at least you can try and pick up some advice here and there, depending on which stage you're in and what's needed in your particular project. As we are approaching the end of this part, I just would like to point out a commonality across many methods that we will come back to in the 3rd video, and that is interaction outside your team and building. This is such a crucial aspect of being entrepreneurial that we will spend considerable time working with this in practice. As you might already know, you've been given the assignment to complete 10 challenges of your choice. among 30 possible challenges. They are all about interaction with what I call S-persons, significant people to your project, but outside your little bubble. I will carefully follow your progress through the reflection tool Loop Me. Let's just briefly look at how this aligns to some of the most prominent entrepreneurial methods. First, let's take a look at the effectuation cycle. Here, people are advised to first ask themselves a number of key questions, such as who am I, what do I know, whom do I know, and what can I do? Then, based on one's answers, people are supposed to interact with other people. Here's where you need to conduct what I often label cold calls. Phone calls to people who were not expecting your call. Or warm calls. If you warm them up through an email or something, that you will be calling them. Also, customer development contains a key step when many friendly first contacts are taken. As soon as it is time to test one's hypothesis, cold calls or warm calls are needed. So when I ask you to take contact with a lot of people during this last year in your education, and as formal part of your education, that is perfectly aligned with what entrepreneurial methods recommend you to do anyway. Finally, some advice from entrepreneurial methods on how to interact with others. From spin selling, we learned that there are 3 different types of people to talk to: friendly people, people with a problem, and people in power. From crossing the chasm, we learned that there are 5 different types of people to talk to: innovators, early adopters, early and late majority, and laggards. From effectuation, we learn about how to ask questions to get to the point quicker. And finally, from the mom test book, we learn to be careful not to trust the answers we get from people. If you ask your mom if she would buy your digital cookbook, or your dad for that sake, she or he will always say yes. But would they buy from a complete stranger? No. So be careful what you ask for. People might lie to you just to be nice, even though they might not even be aware of it themselves.